Hello and welcome to this week's What Were They Thinking? This week we have a few interesting items. A new symptom for the CCP virus, news on the vaccine, and the bizarre behaviours of some of Australia's animals. Let's begin with news on the CCP virus. One of the symptoms, among the many, is development of a swollen and patchy tongue. This is on top of a lack of ability to smell, known as anosmia, the obvious signs of a coronavirus infection, neurological symptoms, cardiac problems, respiratory problems, the list goes on. This new symptom is at least somewhat more immediate and obvious, something that can be seen very quickly. What is less common in this context is just how prevalent this particular symptom is. 1 in 4 patients were able to identify features of it. Their tongues were swollen, had sores on them. There were indentations and discolored patches. 1 in 4 is a very large proportion, although then again we need to consider that it is a relatively small sample at 666 patients. With that particular piece of news about the CCP virus, we can look at something more positive. Johnson & Johnson looks like it might be on its way to having its vaccine approved. This would give yet another vaccine and possibly 100 million doses by the middle of the year to be spread out in America, and then hopefully the rest of the world thereafter. This news comes after initial trial results show that it was effective, enough so that it's looking to try and apply to the FDA for approval. Like many of the other vaccines that have been approved, this involved a very large-scale trial, 45,000 people large. In theory, if Johnson & Johnson has this vaccine approved, some of their recent losses from delayed elective surgery should be mitigated, which will make their shareholders quite happy. The next piece of news is another treatment for the CCP virus, but not a vaccine. It comes from a study of bioprospecting and possible naturally occurring sources of treatment. In this case, it's a product called Aplidin. It is sourced from a rare marine squirt found on a single island near Spain, specifically Ibiza. It is nearly 28 times more effective than remdesivir in cell-based assays, which, as we previously mentioned, anything can be effective depending on what the dose is. The advantages of this drug over others that might be developed is that it's already available in certain countries as a treatment for diseases. In this case, it's used as a treatment for multiple myeloma. It's also worth mentioning this particular candidate for another reason. It wasn't simply screened as part of hundreds of thousands of possible options as many bioprospecting projects have been in the past. Instead, libraries of existing drugs were scoured to try and find possible candidates that would work with key proteins involved in the virus. That's how they found this one. The idea is that they would use data to figure out what was happening, and this is a far more efficient, but obviously intensive approach, because you need to have the available information to begin screening, something that's not always available. Fortunately, based on our knowledge of the coronaviruses, it was far more practical and achievable. This is a reason why this particular candidate drug was earmarked all the way back in March of 2020. Going from weird but useful aquatic animals, we can now look at the weird and wonderful Australian animals, specifically the wombat. The wombat is a bizarre creature to say the least. It's almost like a large dog in a way, very round, almost like a teddy bear. It lives in underground dens, is a herbivore, but also has a very solid bone plate on its backside that protects it from predators. Among Australia's creatures, it's perhaps not the strangest, but it does have one unique feature. It poops in a cube. Other species have their own particular oddities when it comes to feces, with rabbits eating theirs, camels being used for fuel for fires, but none like the wombat have cube-shaped feces. And the question is why? Somebody finally took this mystery in hand, and after receiving dissected specimens from Australia, figured out that it wasn't necessarily the anus itself that was causing them to be cube-shaped. That was round. It had to be further into the animal, and so they were looking at the intestines. It turns out that the intestines are, to start with, quite long, at 9 meters in length. Then the very long intestine takes a long time to progress the material through it. This draws all the moisture out and all the nutrition out. This leads to a very dry fecal drop. This dry material is able to be compacted and keep its shape. This is where examination of the intestine's muscles come in. They differentially contracted with different forces. This meant that it could create sides, tops, and bottoms to the feces. This is what led to the cube shape. Remembering it's 9 meters long, and in this instance, the researchers found that these cube shapes were being formed in the last 17% of the intestine. The other noteworthy phenomena is that where animals are kept in artificial habitats, such as wildlife parks and zoos, feces has nowhere near the same consistency or structure. In the wild, where the animal has less access to water, that is where you find that their feces is far more geometrically shaped. The final newsworthy item this week is a mystery about animals that we've yet to answer. It regards the discovery of a dead finback whale in Italy. The Italian Coast Guard has announced this week that they found the carcass of a whale. The whale was about 20 meters long and weighed 70 ton. This is a very large whale. The way they discovered it is that there was a young calf swimming into the harbour. It was obviously going to be causing trouble given that this is a large sea creature in a relatively busy harbour that could have caused a lot of harm and damage. After following the young calf, they found the dead whale, and they assume that the two are related, although what has killed the adult is uncertain. The whale's body was towed back to the harbour, and marine biologists are attempting to figure out just what has caused its death. That's all the news we have for you this week. Thank you for watching this video. If you have found it interesting, consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. Please post any comments, questions, or suggestions that you have below.